Alexander the Great was crowned King of Macedonia at the young age of 20. With unwavering determination, he managed to conquer most of the known world during his reign. Imagine, one young man holding the entire world in the palm of his hand. And he wasn't just a king who sat back and watched the battles unfold. No, he led the conquests himself, as a general on the front lines of his army. His ambition to conquer the world turned Macedonia into one of the greatest powers of its time. His empire stretched across Greece, northern Macedonia, Thrace, Anatolia, Persia, Egypt, Central Asia, and many more regions. Until his death, he never lost a single battle. He crushed the Persian Empire, an empire once thought to be undefeatable. He conquered Egypt, advanced into India, and was recognized as the King of Kings. He didn't earn the title the Great by chance. He forged it with his own hands. Alexander's greatness was so revered that myths claimed he was the son of Zeus himself, making him a demigod. That alone shows how extraordinary he truly was. In his youth, he was personally tutored by none other than the father of philosophy himself, Aristotle. He grew into a wise and calculated leader. To some, he was a hero, brilliant and powerful. To others, a ruthless dictator with no mercy. He was admired by Julius Caesar, the Roman leader considered one of the greatest military generals in history, and even Napoleon Bonaparte, the first emperor of France, was obsessed with Alexander's accomplishments. And in this video, we're going to explore just how great Alexander the Great truly was. We'll dive deep into his early life, his conquests, and the wars he led. But that's not all. We'll also uncover his complex character and reveal the deeper secrets behind one of the most powerful men who ever lived. Alexander the Great, also known as Alexander III of Macedon, was born in 356 BCE in Pella, the capital of Macedonia, located in the northwest of Thessaloniki, Greece. He was the son of Philip II, the king of Macedonia at the time, and Olympias, the daughter of King Neoptolemus of Epirus. His father, Philip II, also known as Philippus, was a brilliant military and political leader. Through sheer military power and sharp political maneuvering, he transformed Macedonia from a rural backwater of Greece into a powerful military force with a distinct culture and identity. Philip dreamed of one day marching eastward to conquer the mighty Persian Empire, an empire that until then was seen as unmatched. Persia was a global superpower, superior in fields like science, philosophy, and military strength. They had tried multiple times to destroy the stubborn, rebellious Greek states. This dream to conquer Persia might have seemed overly ambitious, perhaps even impossible. From the age of 13 to 16, Alexander was personally tutored by Aristotle, one of the greatest intellectual figures in history. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander developed a deep interest in philosophy, medicine, politics, the arts, and scientific investigation. However, he would eventually grow beyond his teacher's beliefs, especially the view that non-Greeks should be treated as inferiors. This shift in thinking helped Alexander later on, as he built a vast and multicultural empire. Figures like Achilles, Heracles, Hercules, and Dionysus constantly occupied his thoughts. Though they were mythological, they had a massive influence on Alexander's ambitions and actions. In 340 BCE, when Philip went to campaign against Byzantium, he left young Alexander in charge of Macedonia. Alexander seized the opportunity to prove himself, even as a teenager, to be destined for greatness. He led a force to defeat the Thracian Mede tribe, located in what is now southeastern Europe. 2 years later, Philip returned, determined to unite all of Greece under one banner, and launched a war against a coalition of Greek city-states led by Thebes and Athens. This culminated in the Battle of Cheronea, where Alexander led the cavalry and decisively defeated the elite sacred band of Thebes, a military corps of 150 pairs of lovers renowned for their bravery. The victory made Alexander a rising star within the Macedonian military. In 336 BCE, Philip II was assassinated, leaving Macedonia without a clear successor. However, the army, already loyal to Alexander, proclaimed him king without resistance. He quickly executed the princes of Lynkestis, who were suspected to be behind the assassination, along with all rivals and factions that opposed him. It was a swift and brutal consolidation of power. Alexander then attended the Greek city-states meeting that his father had called, known as the League of Corinth. For the first time, the Greeks would unite behind a common goal: to conquer Persia. The League unanimously chose Alexander as hegemon, supreme commander, also known as strategos autokrator. But before striking Persia, Alexander needed to secure Greece itself. He spent time bringing rebellious city-states back into the fold, often with military force. He also launched a campaign against the Thracians in the north. But during this campaign, a rumor spread in Greece that Alexander had died. Thebes seized the moment to rebel. Many Greek city-states supported Thebes more than Alexander, especially Athens, and fresh support for the uprising flooded in. Upon hearing of the rebellion, Alexander marched his army 386 kilometers in just 2 weeks, straight to the gates of Thebes. He gave Thebes an ultimatum: surrender and rejoin the alliance. Thebes refused. In response, Alexander launched a brutal assault. He razed the city to the ground, burning and leveling everything except for temples and the house of the poet Pindar. Around 6,000 were killed, and the survivors were sold into slavery. Terrified by Alexander's wrath, the rest of Greece quickly submitted. He then turned to Athens, offering them the same terms. Having witnessed what had just happened to Thebes, Athens immediately surrendered. Alexander, showing restraint, forgave Athens for their betrayal. Once again, Alexander had used military might to resolve conflict. But inside, he yearned for genuine acceptance from those he conquered. A war raged within him. Could people be united without violence, or was force the only language that worked? Now, Alexander was not just the king of Macedonia, he was king of all Greece, something no hero of Sparta or Athens had ever achieved. And behind him stood the formidable Macedonian warriors, joined by 40,000 Greek soldiers, ready to march eastward and challenge the greatest empire the world had ever known: Persia. Compared to the mighty Persian Empire, Macedonia, or even Greece, was a small force. But Alexander believed that his army was better trained and equipped. He believed his tactics and strategies could defeat Persia's overwhelming numbers. From the moment he ascended the throne, Alexander had set his mind on an expedition to Persia. He had grown up with that idea. Moreover, he needed the wealth of Persia to maintain the army built by his father, Philip II, and to pay off his considerable debts. Alexander had heard of the success of the 10,000 Greek mercenaries led by Xenophon, who had marched across Persian territory and lived to tell the tale. The achievements of Agesilaus of Sparta in his campaign against Persia also served as proof that the Persian Empire could in fact be defeated. Agesilaus was a legendary general who had stood up to Persian forces. Alexander also had a formidable cavalry unit, led by skilled commanders, much like himself. All of this suggested that, though powerful, the Persian army was not invincible. In 333 BCE, Alexander's army met the vast Persian forces led by the new king, Darius III. Alexander advanced with 32,000 men and moved faster than the Persians had expected. His assault was heavy and forced the Persians to retreat. According to Arrian, Alexander's presence played a crucial role in the Macedonian charge. Unlike Darius, Alexander was right in the thick of battle from the first strike to the last. He even dodged a spear that struck his chest plate, and his helmet was shattered by a blow from behind. At one point, he nearly lost his head, if not for a commander who saved him. That's how courageous he was in leading his troops. Alexander's belief in the superiority of his army proved true. The Persian forces, despite their numbers, had grown complacent after decades of luxury and peace. Their army suffered from a lack of discipline and lacked strong cavalry. In contrast, Alexander had a diverse and well-coordinated force: archers, javelin throwers, infantry, and heavy cavalry. With his mastery of combined warfare tactics, Alexander crushed the Persian army and forced Darius III to flee the battlefield with only a few troops in tow. Asia Minor now belonged to Alexander. Panicked by the invasion, Darius retreated to Babylon and made it his base of operations. There, he assembled an enormous army of more than 250,000 soldiers, Persians, Medes, and mercenaries from across his empire. Eager to strike, Darius advanced toward Asia Minor to face Alexander again. But the Macedonians, relentless as ever, broke through Persian lines once more. Seeing the tide of war turning against him again, Darius fled the battlefield, this time so hastily that he abandoned his wife, children, and even his own mother. So ashamed was his mother that she publicly disowned him and instead declared Alexander her son. This gesture would become crucial in legitimizing Alexander's control over the former Persian Empire. In 332 BCE, Alexander reached the city of Tyre, which refused to surrender. The siege lasted 7 long months. When the city finally fell, Alexander, enraged by the delay, allowed his troops to carry out a massacre of 30,000 people. It was here that another side of Alexander began to show: his brutality. He may have been great, but greatness does not always mean goodness. After Tyre, Alexander moved into Egypt, where he was proclaimed pharaoh, the successor of Darius III. Time and again, Darius attempted to negotiate peace and pleaded for the return of his family. Alexander rejected every offer. Finally, Darius gathered his forces and prepared for one last stand at the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BCE. This time, both sides knew the outcome would determine the fate of Persia. The battle was fierce, but once again, Alexander's army triumphed, and Darius fled for the final time. He escaped toward Ecbatana, but Alexander pursued him with a small, swift force. Before Alexander could reach him, however, Darius was betrayed and killed by his own men. One of them was Bessus, a Bactrian noble. Alexander, furious, hunted him down, tortured him, and executed him for the betrayal. Despite everything, Alexander showed his integrity. When he found Darius's body, he gave the fallen king a royal funeral. With Darius dead, Alexander now had the Persian throne for himself. The empire that had threatened Greece for centuries was now part of the Greek world. To secure his grip on Persia, Alexander granted significant freedom to its territories, allowing them to govern themselves in exchange for loyalty. He did not force a change of culture or religion, as many rulers of the time did. In fact, he adopted many Persian customs for himself. This made him popular among the Persian people, but deeply unpopular with his own Macedonian troops. One of his generals and closest friends, while drunk, mocked Alexander's Persian ways. In a fit of rage, Alexander killed him. This tragic moment only deepened the divide between Alexander and his original Macedonian followers. To stabilize his empire and perhaps to chase his growing hunger for glory, Alexander turned his eyes eastward, toward India. In 326 BCE, he crossed the Indus River and entered Taxila, where King Taxiles greeted him with gifts of elephants and soldiers. Taxiles hoped to form an alliance with Alexander, against a neighboring kingdom ruled by King Porus across the Hydaspes River. Together, Alexander and Taxiles defeated Porus in the Battle of the Jellum. Impressed by Porus's bravery, Alexander spared his life and made him an ally. From there, Alexander continued his campaign eastward, meeting more resistance, but none could stop him. He had never lost a battle. Nothing external could stop him. But the real threat was within. His soldiers, exhausted by tropical heat and endless marches, began to revolt. They refused to cross the Ganges River. They said they had reached their limit. Alexander, understanding their fatigue, agreed to turn back. This marked the end of his Indian campaign. Back in Persia, Alexander focused on consolidating his empire. Yet trouble stirred within: rebellious governors, ambitious generals, and rising tension between Macedonians and Persians. Just as he seemed to bring everything under control, tragedy struck. After a grand festival in Ecbatana, Alexander lost his wife to illness. He was never the same again. Weakened by grief, he fell ill in Babylon. 10 days later, on June 13, 323 BCE, Alexander the Great died. He was only 33 years old, and he had ruled for just 12 years and 8 months. No heir had been formally appointed to the throne. In the aftermath of Alexander's death, his generals declared 2 kings: Philip Aridaeus, the half-witted illegitimate son of Philip II, and Alexander IV, the son born posthumously from Alexander's wife Roxana. The empire was divided into satrapies among the generals after long negotiations. However, the empire could barely survive as a single entity following Alexander's death. Both kings were eventually murdered: Aridaeus in 317 BCE, and Alexander IV around 310 or 309 BCE. The provinces became independent kingdoms, and the generals began claiming kingship for themselves, following the example set by Antigonus in 306 BCE. Alexander's greatest mistake, perhaps, was not preparing a worthy successor to carry on the magnificent empire he had built. After his death, the cities that once thrived under his rule fell into disarray. His generals turned against one another, each hoping to become the new supreme ruler. What had held everything together was not laws or systems, but the dynamic personality of Alexander himself. He combined a relentless will to push himself and his army beyond their limits with a flexible mindset. He knew when to retreat and when to adapt his policies. How far he could have gone in coordinating such a vast empire, had he lived longer, remains an open question. We may never know whether his rule would have continued to expand or whether it would have eventually collapsed. Nevertheless, Alexander the Great remains one of the finest and most accomplished generals in history. He displayed exceptional brilliance in combining different types of forces and adapting his strategies to meet the unique challenges of diverse enemies. Whether they were nomadic Scythians, Indian hill tribes, or King Porus with his mighty war elephants, his tactics were creative, opportunistic, and ruthlessly effective. He skillfully exploited the decisive moments of battle, knowing that the right decision at the right time could mean victory or defeat. His cavalry, in particular, was used so efficiently that he rarely needed to rely on his infantry to deliver the final blow. Centuries after his death, military minds like Julius Caesar and Napoleon Bonaparte would look to Alexander as their ultimate model. Perhaps his most lasting legacy was the spread of the idea of absolute monarchy, borrowed from Persia, to the Western world. This concept would inspire future empires, including the Roman Empire and later Napoleon's regime after the French Revolution. Alexander's brief reign marked a crucial turning point in the histories of both Europe and Asia. His campaigns and personal interest in science helped advance knowledge in geography and natural sciences. His conquests shifted the centers of civilization eastward and ushered in a new era of regional monarchies. He initiated the widespread spread of Hellenism, a cultural wave that swept across the Middle East through colonization, creating a unified world that stretched from Gibraltar to the Punjab, open to trade, social interaction, and a shared layer of cultural understanding. Greek became the lingua franca, facilitating communication and commerce across vast distances. Alexander founded numerous cities, many of which bore his name, and left a powerful cultural footprint. He gave the conquered lands a language they could use for diplomacy and trade. Though his conquests were largely driven by a thirst for glory, heroism, and greatness, they resulted in a more interconnected world, one that could exchange goods and ideas more efficiently than ever before. Alexander may not have intended to create such a world, but none of it would have been possible without him. Alexander the Great reshaped the map of the world through his conquests, inspiring generations to come with unmatched ambition and unshakable determination. He remains one of the most influential figures in history, his legacy echoing across time in countless aspects of our lives. Alexander the Great stands as an enduring symbol of extraordinary leadership and limitless ambition, a titan in humanity's ongoing journey toward greatness. Some may see him as a hero, a unifier of empires. Others may remember him as a ruthless conqueror, a man who spilled oceans of blood in the name of glory. But one thing cannot be denied: he was great. Alexander did not inherit that title. He carved it with his own hands, never losing a single battle, never backing down from the impossible. Thank you.